During a time when I was unsure of my ministerial calling, I stepped away from congregational work and spent 3 years teaching in a school connected to the County Juvenile Detention Center. Our students were kids ages 10, and there were 10-year-olds in there, ages 10 to 18, who had been arrested for everything from petty vandalism to rape and murder. While working their way through the court system, they remained incarcerated and came to our classrooms each day when they were not appearing before a judge or meeting with an attorney. Some of the kids appreciated school as a welcome change from sitting in the units all day. Others had clearly long ago come to despise school and were determined to subvert the classroom. Though I had initially little confidence in my capacity for connecting with these kids, most of whom were kids of color and many of different ethnicities, their life experiences absolutely different from mine, in time I did find ways to bridge our differences and enjoyed the work so much I considered leaving ministry entirely to remain a teacher in that school. On Wednesdays, the families of the incarcerated kids could visit in the cafeteria. I remember the many times I walked through the area during visiting hours and came away feeling despair at the future which seemed to be waiting many of my students. Seeing their families, watching the familial interactions, and getting a bit of a sense of what life had been like for these kids. My despair grew from the realization that they often had never even had a chance. The families they were born into, the parents they had, the apparent living circumstances they endured had never been optimal or supportive. These kids, still kids, obviously kids in the ways they talked and behaved, though they typically tried to put on a tough front in detention. These kids had started their lives so far behind what is needed by all of us to have a chance at a good future that to me they seemed doomed to endless suffering and disappointment right from the outset. As I would leave the cafeteria on those visiting days, I wondered how the kids kept going when everything was lined up against them. And yet I saw them coming to class, bouncing around, joking, making plans for when they had finished serving their sentences, doing just what kids everywhere and always do. But how could these kids manage that? This month, our services take up the theme of resilience, a quality any of us needs to keep going, what those kids in juvenile detention needed an extra helping of to keep going, a quality that makes it possible for us to not simply endure life challenges, but to navigate them with a measure of grace and even at some point find them meaningful, experiences that shape us in ways we come to value. Resilience is more than native intelligence, more than a generous spirit, more than an endless supply of patience, more than cleverness, more than healthy bank accounts and dependable cars and wide networks of friends and excellent insurance policies, all the usual items we want right there at hand when the inevitable times of suffering come to us. None of us, no matter how carefully we live, no matter how wisely we plan, none of us makes it through life unscathed. So if the time is coming, or it's already upon you, when you find yourself driven to your knees and all the nails are coming out of things, how do you keep from being beaten? Good support systems are not enough in the face of overwhelming struggles, though they do help. Rather, we seem to need something internal some inner quality to come out the other side not intact, for remaining intact will usually not be possible, but to come out the other side somehow strengthened, wiser, still committed to living and loving well, and actually able to do just that as a result of the challenges and how we meet them, actually able to live more fully and love more deeply as a result of the challenges. Psychological studies suggest that resilience first comes to us, or does not come to us, within the context of the families that raise us. Parents and other significant adults, sometimes siblings as well, are our first resilience coaches. In my own Texas family, the particular people who were my parents did not seem to have access to resilience, and so were not equipped to help my siblings and me learn how to meet life challenges with the sort of flexibility, creativity, and patience that come together in a resilient individual. My father and mother had extraordinarily difficult childhoods themselves and apparently survived by virtue of becoming thoroughly defended against hardship and pain. That is, they denied its existence, refused to respond to it with either anger or tears, did not ask for help, but in the face of struggle hardened themselves, building a thick, tough armor around their hearts and souls. Such a response is a common one. It is a response that our culture encourages on all sides through images of superheroes who are immune to pain, or through models of success who are smart and rich enough to be shielded from struggle by wealth and cleverness and having just the right connections. Any one of us, when we come upon an opponent, will likely move to defend ourselves in some way. And defensive maneuvers do protect us, but defending is not the same as being resilient. Defending does not result in any changes in my being. Defending does not leave me stronger or wiser or more sensitive, but leaves me pretty much the same as I was when I first met a challenge, only a bit more tired. Take a look back at some of the significant struggles you faced in your own life. Did you throw up your armor against them? Did you fight with all your might to keep them at bay? Did you fight to overpower them before they overpowered you? And if that was your response, the response of defense, how did that turn out? Where I did receive some excellent coaching in the art of resilience came from my paternal grandmother, the woman who cared for my siblings and me while my parents worked full-time. Her life had brought repeated hardship. Her mother died when my grandmother was 16. She married young to a man who was an alcoholic and, in her words, a scoundrel. He was killed in a car accident, leaving her with 5 children and $50 to her name. 4 of her 5 children predeceased her in freakish accidents, such as being struck by lightning. One of her children even died on Christmas Day. Endless hardship. Yet this grandmother was neither bitter nor fatalistic. Oh, she did teach me that life could be unimaginably hard. There was no whitewashing of experience, no rose-colored glasses for her, but she maintained a solid faith, which I saw manifested in regular church attendance and Bible reading, and she seemed to have an inexhaustible capacity for loving her grandchildren unconditionally, even though we forever tested her patience. My grandmother said often that it was Jesus who got her through all the suffering of her life. Her favorite hymns were those that depicted Jesus as an abiding friend, one who would never abandon or disappoint. Jesus brought me through. What exactly does that mean? If we set aside theological differences and traditional language, what does Jesus have to do with being resilient in the way my grandmother was resilient? In being able to not be beaten by hardship, in being able to keep a loving and open heart and keep looking forward with expectancy to the future rather than fearing the next blow it might bring. The kids in detention had visits with a chaplain and religious services because, as the warden explained, they needed something to hang on to. What is it about a spiritual path that constitutes something to hang on to? And how does that get a kid or a grandmother or anybody through suffering? Author David McCullough Jr., a teacher at Wellesley High School in Massachusetts, gave a commencement address which subsequently went viral and then was expanded and transformed into a book entitled "You Are Not Special and Other Encouragements." In his speech and book, McCullough takes aim at what might otherwise seem a good trend in the ways we parent our children now by giving them every opportunity imaginable and endlessly telling them they are wonderful, smart, capable of anything, great people. Those strike me as just the right messages for parents to give children. Who among us does not want our kids to have every opportunity imaginable so they can grow up to be confident, experienced adults? Yet the problem McCullough detects in this seemingly positive trend is that it diminishes the meaning of excellence, encourages egotism, and eliminates the growth that can only happen as a result of overwhelming struggle. McCullough worries that his students lack humility, a necessary awareness of their limitations because they've been taught to see themselves as unlimited in every way. As a result, he believes they are ill-equipped to face the inevitable pain that will surely come to them just in the course of living. Limitations are what drive us to make extraordinary efforts, to summon new heights of creativity. Limitations are also what drive us to one another, looking outside the self for resources and strength, or in my grandmother's words, looking for Jesus, looking for something that represents possibilities not within my control, but nonetheless available to me when I need them. As I read McCullough's critique, I confess that I heard some of our customary Unitarian Universalist lines echoing in there. Our unfailingly positive view of each individual and their unlimited capacity for discerning truth and doing justice. That is a vision which elicits my wholehearted commitment. Yet it sometimes seems thin in its absence of any references beyond the self. That it never seems to acknowledge that as an individual, I am, while having great potential, also decidedly limited in understanding, and so would do well to maintain a sense of humility about that limitation, and to be willing to rely on the capacities and understandings of others, and even the possibility of an indescribable mystery, what my grandmother called Jesus, a mystery that I cannot control nor manipulate, but which may, just may be present in extreme circumstances to empower me and others beyond what we thought possible. Now, if this seems as though I'm suggesting that pain and loss and struggle are good things, to be clear, none of the pain my own life has brought, none of the pain the people I love have encountered, none of the pain I have seen come into the lives of people in my churches, none of that pain would I ever consider good. Not a part of any divine plan, not some kind of blessing in disguise. Always, I believe suffering is best when it just doesn't happen. I remember vividly the moment when my son was small and had attempted to go down a slide on the playground that was more complicated than he had counted on, so that he lost control of himself and fell. As I ran over to scoop him up and comfort him, a kind of new awareness bloomed inside me. I realized that no matter how attentively and skillfully I cared for him, I would not be able to protect him from all life's challenges. That there would inevitably be times when he would experience pain that could not have been prevented, and his only option would be to endure it as best he could. Along with teaching him how to go down a slide without falling, I would need to teach him how to pick himself up once he had fallen, because he would surely fall, and often. He needed to learn from me not just caution or cleverness, but also how to live in the midst of pain without giving up hope. And that teaching would only come through times of being hurt and lost. My grandmother taught me to look for Jesus at such times. I taught my son what my own life had shown me, perhaps the same thing my grandmother was talking about with that image of Jesus. Deep within us, at the very ground of our being, lies mystery and an inexhaustible love. That strange combination of mystery and love will carry a person through suffering in ways that make it possible to grow not tougher, but actually softer, more open, more trusting. In other words, to become resilient, so that suffering does not diminish, but mysteriously enhances. You are a congregation in transition, moving away from your previous chapter as a spiritual community, taking your first steps towards the next chapter in who you will be going forward. Later this month, you will vote on the people who will serve on the Ministerial Search Committee, and their work will point you ever more powerfully towards your future. What possibilities do you see today in that future? What hopes do you carry for your future as a congregation? What hopes do you carry for your own lives and the lives of those you love? What hopes do you carry for our larger community, our world? These days, are you mostly hoping that at least nothing terrible will happen? Or is your hope greater than just the hope to avoid pain? Perhaps we could carry a third hope, namely that when, not if, but when, pain does come upon us, we will resist the predictable response of putting on protective armor and defending ourselves, and instead try opening out, walking towards it. Myths of the hero quest frequently included a chapter, usually near the end, when the main character is tested one more time, has to face an overwhelming opponent, and rely on something other than skills in sword fighting. At those moments, the hero's true spirit is revealed, a capacity for reaching beyond the ego to a place of mystery, of trust, of Jesus, of a grounding strength beyond imagining. The hero never emerges from this final encounter unscathed. Sometimes a limb is lost. Sometimes an eye is put out. Often scars remain. But the hero also loses in this encounter any remaining fear of what might happen. The fear is replaced by an abiding awareness that at the center of experience is goodness, goodness everlasting. As we walk on into our church transition, our justice efforts, our own complicated lives, may we walk in hope of finding that goodness for ourselves so that we can believe we will never again be entirely lost. May it be so. Amen.